Hello campers, families, and friends. It's Sarah at Vin's Nature Camp, and I want to welcome you back to another week of Campfire Stories. Got your s'mores supplies ready? Excellent. Then I think we can go ahead and get started. As we do every week, before we start today's stories, we're going to take a minute to reflect on the past week we've had. My favorite memory from this last week was the arrival of a new batch of baby chicks just in time for Easter. They're so tiny and adorable right now. Eventually they'll grow up and go outside with my flock of chickens, but it's been very exciting having them. How about you? What's your favorite memory from this past week? Go ahead, pause the video now if you want to, and share that with those around you. Today's Campfire Stories are part of Vin's Be a Naturalist series that we've been doing this week. If you haven't done so already, be sure to go back and check out some of the other videos in this series, and you too can learn how to be a naturalist yourself. A naturalist is a student of nature. They know that there's so much to learn from the natural world if you only go out and spend time in it and use your powers of observation, touch, smell, hearing, and sight to explore it. Today's stories are going to talk about those observation skills, but also introduce a few other skills that are really important to practice if you want to go out and be a naturalist yourself. Our first story today comes from Keepers of Life. Remember this one from last week? It's one of the books in the series compiled by Michael Caduto and Joseph Bouchak, and it's called The Woman Who Lives in the Earth, from the Chugach Inuit of the Arctic, which works out perfectly because I'm having a little snow squall right now. The animals, the birds, the lakes and trees, even the grass, all these have something alive which dwells within them. The Chugach people call this the Shua, and earth itself on which life depends also contains a Shua. The Chugach call this being Nunam Shua, the one who lives within the earth, and she is seen as a woman. A bright light shines all around her when she walks. She wears boots made of fur of all the animals of the land. She wears a long coat which hangs down to her knees, hangs as lichen hangs on stones. On her coat are many tiny animals: the caribou, the Arctic fox, the muskox, the wolf, the bear, the lemming, and the hare. These are all the souls of the animals which she protects, all of the animals of the land. The first children, the Inuit say, were formed out of earth in the places where small willow trees grow. They were covered by the willow leaves, and the soil gave them food. So the human beings must always be careful what they do on earth. They must remember Nunam Shua. One day, during the time when the caribou migrate, a hunter went out to seek game. As he walked, he was careful where he stepped, so that he did not scrape the lichen off the stones. When he moved through a thicket of small alder trees, he bent the branches gently so that they did not break. Soon he came upon the caribou herd, and he stalked closer. He was careful in his movements, so he was able to come very close to the caribou without frightening them. He watched them for a long time, observing the ones which were cows with calves, and the ones which were leading the herd. Those were the animals which he knew should not be killed. He chose the caribou he wished to take and then spoke to its spirit as he pulled back the arrow in his bow. His shot was a good one, and the animal fell dead. He could have shot more caribou, but he did not need to. So he put down his weapon, took his pouch from his side, and went to the fallen caribou. Before he began to cut it up, he thanked the animal's spirit for giving itself to him. Then he placed something in its mouth to show his gratitude. As he skinned and butchered the animal, he wiped his hands on his own clothing and not on the grass, remembering that the grass is sacred during the time when the caribou migrate. This hunter did not know it, but everything he did had been watched by Nunam Shua. He became aware of a light and turned to see a woman walking toward him. The air shone all around her as she walked. Her feet sank into the earth with each step. He was afraid because he knew who this was. He knew the power of the woman who dwells in the earth. Not long ago, a man had been cutting an alder tree and had fallen dead. The people knew he had died because Nunam Shua lived within the alders, and the man had not shown respect for the tree while cutting it. Nunam Shua came close to the man and stopped. She looked straight into the hunter's face, and he looked down at the earth to show respect. "You have done well, child," she said to him. "You hunt the animals with care. You do not show contempt for the grass and the trees and the earth. So I give you these." Then Nunam Shua reached up and took from her coat tiny animals in the shape of the caribou, the muskox, and the hare. The man held out his hands to take those tiny animals. As soon as he touched them, they melted like snow on his hands. When he looked up, Nunam Shua was gone. But because she had given him the gift of those animal spirits, a gift which had entered him like rain into the soil, from that time on he was always successful whenever he hunted the animals of the land. Now our hunter had to be a naturalist. Long ago times, they didn't have grocery stores that you could go to get all the food you needed. So people relied on what nature provided them. And they had to use those powers of observation in order to be able to find the wild plants that they foraged, or track the animals they hunted, and even to know when to plant the crops they had. So even though they didn't know it at the time, they were practicing those skills of naturalists, being observant. But they also, like this story teaches us, practiced respect. Respect for all things. They relied for survival on what nature was able to provide them. And they knew that they had to respect those resources in order to continue to survive. So as naturalists, when we're out and about in the woods or other natural spaces, we need to be respectful as well. Otherwise, if we go crashing through the forest, all the animals are going to hide and not reveal themselves to us. Or if we move too quickly, we might not notice the interesting plant at our feet below us. Our next story is going to tell us a little bit more about respect, and also introduce another skill that we need to remember when we're out being naturalists. Our next story is from Keepers of the Animals. It's called The Rabbit Dance, from the Mohawk of the Eastern Woodlands. Long ago, a group of hunters were out looking for game. They had seen no sign of animals, but they went slowly and carefully through the forest, knowing that at any moment they might find something. Just ahead of them was a clearing. The leader of the hunters held up his hand for the others to pause. He thought he had seen something. All of the men dropped down on their stomachs and crept to the clearing's edge to see what they could see. What they saw amazed them. There in the center of the clearing was the biggest rabbit any of them had ever seen. It seemed to be as big as a small bear. One of the hunters slowly began to raise his bow. A rabbit as large as that one would be enough food for the whole village. But the leader of the men held out his hand and made a small motion that the man with the bow understood. He lowered his weapon. Something unusual was happening. It was best to just watch and wait to see what would happen next. The rabbit lifted its head and looked toward the men. Even though they were well hidden on the other side of the clearing, it seemed as if the giant rabbit could see them. But the rabbit did not take flight. Instead, it just nodded its head. Then it lifted one of its feet and thumped the ground. As soon as it did so, other rabbits began to come into the clearing. They came from all directions and, like their chief, paid no attention to the hunters. Now the big rabbit began to thump its foot against the ground in a different way. Ba-pum, 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 ba-pum. It was like the sound of a drum beating. The rabbits all around made a big circle and began to dance. They danced and danced. They danced in couples. and moved in and out and back and forth. It was a very good dance the rabbits did. The hunters who were watching found themselves tapping the earth with their hands in the same beat as the big rabbit's foot. Then suddenly the big rabbit stopped thumping the earth. All of the rabbits stopped dancing. Ba-pum! The chief of the rabbits thumped the earth one final time. It leaped high into the air right over the men's heads, and then it was gone. All the other rabbits ran in every direction out of the clearing, and they were gone too. The men were astonished at what they had seen. None of them had ever seen anything at all like this. None of them had ever heard or seen such a dance. It was all they could talk about as they made their way back to the village. When they reached the village, they went straight to the longhouse where the clan mother lived. She was a very wise woman who knew a great deal about animals. They told her their story. She listened closely. When they were done telling the story, she picked up a drum and handed it to the leader of the hunters. "Play the rhythm which the rabbit chief played," she said. The leader of the men did as she asked. He played the rhythm of the rabbit's dance. "That is a good sound," said the clan mother. "Now show me the dance which the rabbit people showed you." The hunters then did the dance while their leader played the drum. The clan mother listened closely and watched. When they were done, she smiled. "I understand what has happened," she said. "The rabbit people know that we rely on them. We hunt them for food and for clothing. The rabbit chief has given us this special dance so that we can honor his people for all they give to human beings. If we play their song and do their dance, then the rabbits will know we are grateful for all they continue to give us. We must call this new song the Rabbit Dance, and we must do it men and women together to honor them." And so it was a new social dance was given to the people. To this day, the rabbit dance is done to thank the rabbit people for all they have given, not only food and clothing, but also a fine dance that makes people glad. Now our hunters in that story, just like in the previous story, were very respectful as they moved through the forest. And they were also really patient. And that's one of the most important skills if you want to be a naturalist, is to be willing to be patient and wait and see what reveals itself to you. For those hunters, they were given the unique opportunity to witness the rabbit dance. So as naturalists, if you were to go out into the woods, at first, all the animals would run away as they heard you coming. But if you chose one particular spot and sat down and waited, it wouldn't take very long before the animals got used to your presence. And then they'd start going about their normal activities, which can be really cool to watch. One of my favorite naturalist activities is what's called a sit spot. You're going to go out, find a spot in the woods or in a natural place near your house. You could even take a piece of paper or a journal, or you could print off the sheet that's included in the link on this video and record all of your observations that you're making. All of your senses should be working: sight, hearing, touch, and smell. You can record everything that you observe, and you could even start going back and keeping a record, and you could see what's changed in that spot and what's stayed the same. It's a really great way to begin your naturalist career. So that's it for this week's Campfire Stories. I hope you've enjoyed them. I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Until then, happy observing. And now it's time for s'mores.